This is Democracy Watch. So, Mark, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas has just been referred to the Justice Department for his failure to disclose gifts and income as required by the Ethics in Government Act. Is this enough of a predicate to open some type of criminal investigation into the Supreme Court Justice?
So we've talked a lot on this series about how there are two tiers of justice in this country, right? I have complained over and over again, as you have, that Donald Trump, despite all of his whining, is actually gotten treated much better by the criminal justice system than anyone else. And so, if you were a regular run-of-the-mill federal employee who repeatedly failed to disclose under penalty of perjury, which is how you fill out these forms. You actually sign the forms and it says under penalty of perjury. If you had a federal employee who filled out these forms, as they do, who repeatedly omitted not just small gifts, but gifts that were in the millions of dollars, and particularly if the person giving the gifts had business before the agency, it would be enough, at least for an inspector general investigation and potentially a criminal investigation. But we do live in a system of two tiers of justice. And we do live in a system in which the Donald Trumps of the world do get to be in contempt of court and don't get in trouble. They get presidential immunity. They get delays upon delays upon delays. So do I believe that there will be a criminal investigation of a justice of the Supreme Court? No, I don't. And that is the reality of, and it's the bitter irony that when you hear the powerful complain that they are being held to a different standard, I shake my head and say, yes, you are, but not the way you think.
Right. Well, what really stands out here is that the Senate actually found that Justice Thomas accepted even more undisclosed luxury travel sponsored by Harlan Crow, this time a private jet flight from Hawaii to New Zealand. We did an episode just a few weeks ago about Justice Thomas having to amend his financial disclosures because he neglected to include major gifts. So could there still be more out there after all of this media scrutiny?
Yeah. I mean, look, we say all of this media scrutiny, but honestly, The scrutiny here has largely been, and kudos to them for doing this, but it has largely not been by the news outlets that cover the Supreme Court, right? I mean, that's the irony, right? It's been sort of journalists, investigative journalists, and journalists who care about good government who have been leading the charge here. But, the problem with the Supreme Court is that unlike members of Congress, where there are a score of journalists who are poring over everything they do to try to see if there's a misstep. Unlike the presidential campaigns or governors, where there are press corps that just cover them day in, day out. A lot of the Supreme Court media coverage is basically like just taking what the Supreme Court says and then translating into English to people. They're not actually covering the justices of the court in a critical fashion. And I think that has to change. So is it possible that there is more out there? Well, of course there's more out there because Brian, it's been months and months where each time we say, well, is it possible there's more out there? There's a lot more out there. It's not like they're finding a couple of things here and there. They're finding they're breaking major stories.
Yeah. Well, what kind of legislation then would actually serve as a proper deterrent for this kind of behavior?
Look, I think a few things. I mean, the first thing is that we need to reorient our system of government, that we expect that justices on the Supreme Court will be held to a higher standard than career civil servants, not a lower standard, right? Yeah. That's number one. Number two, we need reforms to the law that make it explicitly clear that if you fail to properly disclose gifts, that will be treated seriously. Like, that is not going to be a slap on the wrist. We also need to ban those gifts. The truth is, I couldn't buy a member of the House or the Senate or someone in the executive branch, I couldn't buy them a $100 bottle of wine. They'd have to pay for it or return it. Yeah. Why on earth are Supreme Court justices, left, right, middle, across the spectrum, why are they accepting gifts? Why are they accepting any of these gifts? Right? I mean, if you look at the disclosures of what a Hill staffer or an executive branch staffer puts on their forms around gifts, it's like, I had a wedding and someone bought me a table setting. Like, it's not these kind of lavish gifts. So these need to be banned. And then we need to look seriously at Supreme Court reform more generally, not just an ethics code around it, but they have become impervious to any kind of accountability by Congress. You know, when you and I talked about this in an episode a long time ago, it felt like a long time ago. The Senate asked the Chief Justice to come and explain some of this stuff, and he turned down the offer. And at the time, I said, "Boy, this is a real mistake on the part of the Chief's standpoint. Like you are not above congressional oversight. No one's above oversight by the other branches. So we need to reset a culture here of oversight, both by Congress and the executive branch of the Supreme Court. Supreme Court obviously has oversight of basically everything else. So I think that's really important."
Well, not only impervious, but actually hostile. I believe it was Neil Gorsuch who came out on TV just a few days ago, and amid these calls for court reform, he offered, "Be careful." What do you make of that?
Boy, I got to tell you, I saw that and I was very surprised. I mean, you know, Justice Gorsuch and I don't agree on a lot philosophically, but actually I normally consider him to be one of the justices that has a pretty even judicial temper, you know, which is a good thing in a justice. But boy, I think saying something like that, which can be open to the interpretation, that what he means by be careful is be careful because you know, if Congress goes too far, maybe we, the Supreme Court, will exact some retribution. Yeah. That is just the furthest thing from what a justice should be allowing to be insinuated. I'm not saying that that's how he meant it, but he should be more careful with his words. Like he should not be saying things that can be construed that way, whether he intended it or not. If by be careful he means be careful in going too far because you will undermine public confidence in the Supreme Court, well, my message to him is that you guys have done that. That's not, right. You know, like you guys have done that. And if by be careful, he says, be careful because you may wind up winding up with a bad set of policy decisions. My answer to them is that's Congress's job, not yours, right? It's the job of Congress. Congress created the 9 justices and can create 12 or create 3. Like that's not the job of the Supreme Court justice to decide what the right reforms are. That is actually left to the legislative power in Congress.
Right, and it shouldn't be on us right here saying that it is that it is not on the Supreme Court to be able to have full autonomy in a system of checks and balances. But
yeah, and it's not, and you know, going back to a few common themes here. You know, it is simply not appropriate for a Supreme Court justice to act in a way that suggests even the appearance. You know, they are supposed to be held to an appearance standard. It is not appropriate for a Supreme Court justice to say or do things that give the appearance that they are anything but impartial. And when you have the flag controversy with Alito, that is certainly giving that appearance. When you have the Justice Thomas's wife involved politically as she was around January 6th, and then he doesn't recuse himself, that is giving an appearance that you don't want to be given. When you have the Chief Justice refusing to meet with the Senate voluntarily, that gives an appearance. What Neil Gorsuch said here gives an appearance. So I don't understand, honestly, and I know some of the viewers are going to be writing comments now like, Mark, you're totally naive. Don't you understand? I understand, right? I don't understand why the conservative justices on the court seem to constantly misread how to act in a way that instills confidence, even at a time, especially at a time where their rulings are not inspiring confidence of impartiality.
Well, you know, I think if I can offer this, I think that it's not really about that for them anymore. And in the same way that the Republican Party is not really worried about the optics of what they're doing, and you have Donald Trump out there saying that he has enough votes because he's so certain that there's going to be people in the county election official position that are going to delay or block certification on his behalf. The veil is lifted and they're not bothering to worry about optics or good governance. It is just about the ultimate goal that was behind all of this, that proved that all of their slogans were just the empty veneer, is that it's just about consolidating power and keeping power for themselves once they actually get it. And so that's why you have these Supreme Court justices who have given up all pretense of pretending that they are focused on following the rules, and even when pushed on it, will come out and say, be careful. and give the impression that they're offering a threat to those who are looking to take some of that power back, power that they're not entitled to in the first place. But this is a rot that has pervaded the entirety of the Republican Party, starting with Donald Trump, going over to these Supreme Court justices who don't even seem to care anymore, who are literally flying flags outside of all of their homes that prove where their political allegiances lie. And it's going all the way down to these state legislators and county board members and election officials who are just saying outright in broad daylight that they're not interested in following the law or abiding by their oaths to the Constitution. They are just there to consolidate power for the Republican Party and nothing more.
Yeah, and I think that this is an issue in which not only has the media that covers the Supreme Court not done a service to the country, but frankly, the legal establishment also hasn't either. Because honestly, lawyers like me and others have been too slow to come to the place that, frankly, non-lawyers like you have been at. I mean, if you look at how long it took President Biden to adopt reforms, that is the reflection of the fact that he is a lawyer. And I think for many of us, it was harder for us to get to the place of drawing the connections that you, as a non-lawyer, saw as very obvious. And I think that this last term, I mean, just speaking for myself, this last Supreme Court term, and particularly the immunity ruling, but not just the immunity, the 14th Amendment ruling, the way in which the schedules were being seemingly gamed with, it just, I could no longer square any ideology, originalism, textualism, ideologies I don't even agree with. I couldn't square them with what we were seeing. And I think that for me, and probably for President Biden and others, this last term was really the last straw.
Yeah, and which makes total sense, because that's when the veil was completely lifted. But don't sell yourself short. You have been, on the front lines for democracy stronger than anybody else in the legal establishment that any of us have seen. So to that point, then, for those watching right now, to support the invaluable work that Mark and his team are doing in the courts, please make sure to sign up for Democracy Docket. I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Teller Cohen.
I'm Mark Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.